Welcome to the No Fear podcast and the No Fear live broadcast. I'm your host, Tony Lauer. If you're into mindset training, performance psychology, personal development, you'll dig this new format. No Fear Live is a unique broadcast, and it's different from the No Fear podcast. We decided to go live because we wanted to create the opportunity to interact with people like you all over the world, where anyone can log in and ask questions, and in some cases, you may even get invited into the show. The great thing about the live broadcast is that it's much more personal for the listener. That's you. Remember, self-defense isn't always about a confrontation with someone else. The first and most important fight is winning the one inside your head. Pretty fancy.
Live.
Pretty fancy.
Is that really you?
Dude, how are you?
I'm good. It's been a long time.
Marco Lala. It's been an insane long time. When is the last time we saw each other in person?
I'm almost embarrassed to say it, but I think it was we were at that like Jerry Beasley College, I think.
How's this picture?
Holy cow. I gotta take my glasses off for that. Oh my goodness.
Isn't that crazy?
Look at that crew that's there.
But look at the legends. Look at the legends here.
Holy shit. Look at that.
So the great Joe Louis, the late great Joe Louis, Michael DePasquale, the Lysak brothers, Dan Severn, Maurice Smith, Keith Hackney.
Oh my God. Who's
this little boy?
Nobody really knew it, but I was just carrying everybody's bags over there on the side.
Right.
I was you guys need anything? Coffee? What do you need?
Right.
That's funny.
Isn't that crazy?
That's crazy, yeah. And that was what year was that? Do you remember what year that was? I mean,
early. It had to be like right after the UFC because Keith's there. So maybe 93, 94.
That's amazing. Yeah, 30 years.
Was that the last time we saw each other in person?
I think actually, you know what? I think I went to a couple of your seminars locally. I think you might have done something in Jersey at the time or New York.
Right.
I popped in, but it was always great to go to your seminars because you know what the big difference was at that time. I think I still was doing the very traditional. I mean, it's funny. Kyokushin was a traditional karate style. We did do the full contact fighting that was Muay Thai oriented, but we still had katas and everything. And it was just a breath of fresh air because I remember when I saw the panic attack, I'm like, I don't remember that kata.
Right.
I don't remember that kata. Guy getting out of a car and beating the shit out of somebody, from behind. I'm like, what form is that?
You know what's funny, and I wish you could say that because I'd have had Elisa prep some of the videos from the panic attack tapes because I haven't even thought about them until you just said that.
That was a game changer for me, man. It was.
But two things about that. At the first UFC in 1993, I'm in Colorado. I'm writing for 3 magazines, and I get in the elevator, and I just forgot the guy's name. It was a guy from Spain who had a magazine, and there was remember Zane Fraser, one of the big guys. He was in the first UFC. He goes, holy shit, you're Tony Blauer, and I'm in an elevator, and I'm like, oh fuck, I hope I don't get beaten up right now because like I'm in this confined space. And he goes, man, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for your panic attack tapes.
Oh, that's awesome.
He says, when we saw that, we just started going at it. And that was really, I think those original panic attacks got a lot of people intuitively doing mixed martial art.
Right.
Because you had to, there was no way that you could just box and kick because ultimately you're going to grapple and somebody's going to fall to the ground. Right. And yet you had to figure out your shit.
Yeah, it was eye opening. I think what happens a lot in the traditional arts is I don't think anybody goes into them saying, you know what, I'm doing this so I can attain spiritual perfection, and 40 years from now I'm going to be able to walk on water or whatever you think. I want to go defend myself, right? But then you get kind of lured away. It's like katas and tournaments and everything like that, and I even see that happening a little bit in the like in the BJJ with the self-defense and the sport and everything. Like I was watching this one guy do a seminar, and he pulled out like blue and purple belts, and they're like, okay, get into it, get them in a headlock, and they didn't learn the headlock escape from
Right.
from the third class, or the mount, because they're trying to do like reverse De La Rivas and Berimbolos and shit, and I'm thinking to myself, you know what, it's like a circle, and you kind of come back to what you're over the hood of a car being choked. I mean, there's no
Right.
form for that. There's not.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any bunk guy, from traditional kata that showed that. Maybe before you got to that point, that's with the self-awareness and situational awareness and everything. You don't want to end up being, bent over on the hood of a car with your neck getting choked. But what happens if that you get there? What do you
Yeah,
do?
that was our big insight, and that was the thing. If anyone ever read the article, I don't know if Elisa, you can do a search for it. The article, it should be in Substack. Mitch got dropped and popped the link in there, but there was I was 20 years old, and one of my students got dropped in a fight at school that his dad had hired me to teach him some bully prevention, and when he told me what happened, I was like, I taught him how to box. I taught him how to clinch. I taught him how to wrestle. I taught him how to kick. And I was doing mixed martial art, accidentally doing mixed martial art, but I wasn't teaching situational awareness. I wasn't teaching scenario design. How do you manage the emotional, psychological distractions? And that to me is still the single missing element of most martial arts systems, particularly those that also say in the Yellow Pages ad, learn this martial art, learn self-defense, learn self-confidence. And in terms of real world violence, it always falls short because the emotional psychological assault, and hence the whole name of No Fear, the whole emotional psychological assault can take you out of your game. I mean, the neuroscience is your executive function is hijacked. You don't have access to your cognitive brain. You're in your reactive brain, and now you've gone from parasympathetic, oh, I'm having a nice day, to sympathetic. And you've seen it even in tournaments. I'm sure you had people in the day, students of yours or peers of yours, who you went to. We'll show some clips of you competing back in the day, who could kick as high as you and kick as fast as you, but they shit their pants before a tournament.
Right.
And you were able to manage your fear and get in there. And let's do this real quick and try and find.
The one thing I got at Yellow
Yeah.
Page, really dating yourself. Did you say Yellow Pages?
Yes, I did. I said that on purpose because I wanted to to do this.
I remember those ads there. Karate, self-defense.
Learn to defend yourself. So for people who don't really know Marco, before I show like a video, before it was cool to have videos, he was producing videos. You wrote your first book when you're 17 or 20.
The pamphlet was believe it or not, Phenomenal Endurance Training was 1987. I was 18. I was 18.
Insane.
And those two. Now, The Ultimate Weapon was actually the first book. I actually created a manuscript. I Xeroxed. There's another word. Xerox, Yellow Pages.
Xerox
copies, and I mailed them out. And every publisher denied it except for this firm, Alpha Publications, which was like a low budget Paladin press. Remember Paladin Press?
Sure.
With all those wacky books, anarchies.
How to build a bomb.
How to build a bomb and all that shit. So I got a royalty, but because if I bought them at a discount and sold them, instead of getting a 10% royalty, I was buying them at a 50% discount, reselling. I was like, I'm making more money. So right. I said, fuck this. I'm going to self-produce. And then, Panther Productions, they raped, I don't know how many martial artists. They had signed their lives away. And, I had one guy that produced like a 20 series Kung Fu tape, and he couldn't even, he every time he did a video, he had to wear a mask because he thought he was going to get sued by Panther Productions. Right. Because it's like, I'm never going to let that happen.
I'll tell you what, I did 5 tapes for Panther. I never really made any money, but it got our system worldwide.
Yeah.
Right. And like I said, in 1993, I had UFC fighters going, I'm here because of Panic Attack series. I want to show, and I don't know if this is it. I'll switch it if it's not.
Oh, yeah, I did all. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I got the striking and the grappling in there, and the groundwork and the throws.
Let's see each
Like,
one of these things. So, I'm showing this because I want people to
right
know, like,
here, that's like a textbook, like, shoulder throw. I used to practice that a million times, man, in the woods. You know, the
is this that
sayonage.
classic? There, that spinning
Oh,
back kick.
the kick.
Yeah.
The kick.
Let's look at that again, guys. Watch this kick here,
Right.
bottom left corner. Right.
You know, crazy.
Hang on a sec. It's making your audio cut out. 1 sec.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I
What
was
were you
gonna
saying?
say, growing up as a kid, right, let's see your football, basketball, baseball, right? There was always that one game or let's say like championship game. Like if you like fucking fumble the ball and your team loses, you'll never like forget that. Like for the rest of your life. It's like shit, we lost the championship because I made an error. That was like one of those things where like I won that year and that one thing was like catapulted. It's like I could actually like instead of selling a death touch video, remember that shit, how big, Dillman and all
Didn't
that other
knock.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, let me do a video on like could I ever have done a video like how to knock out any attacker within seconds, but just say it, like, yeah, this is how you knock somebody out. But all right, I got video proof of it. Somebody sent me that video 3 years after that tournament on a VHS tape in a bubble envelope. And I'm jogging one day. I had already written the books. I tell this little story online on a post, and I just get this like mysterious bubble envelope with a VHS tape in there, and it's the entire tournament. With all 4 of my matches, knocking someone out. I had already written the phenomenal endurance training and the ultimate weapon. So I had a plastic box with index cards and with like 2,000 people that ordered my booklets. And I said, you know what? I typed with the friggin' typewriter, the old school typewriter, little letter saying, hey, it's my first video. It's got real footage of me, blah, 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 mailed it out. I think I sold like a couple of 100 copies at like $60 a pop. They were $59.95, and that's how I paid for my wedding reception. It's
Nice.
like, now, all right, I got to come up with 27 more videos.
Right.
That you always got to have the back end, right?
So one thing I just want to share this now because it's 2023 and this is like going back,
91.
But what is that? 30 something years, 40 years ago?
30. That's over.
I want everyone thinking about here just like how entrepreneurial you were at a young age. Like, did you have was that
Gary V? That was the Gary V of.
You were the Gary V of the March. Now,
dude, I was obsessed with Halo.
Your original martial art was Kyokushinkai.
Yeah, I did Kempo for a summer and then I quit. That was in the 8th grade, but then I started Kyokushin in high school, my first year of high school.
So like Kyokushinkai is no joke. It's fucking like it's full contact to the legs and the body, also to the head, not punching, right? Punching to the body, kicks to the head. Yeah. Like that's like even back then. So there's a pretty other famous fighter who comes from Kyokushinkai named George St. Pierre.
Yeah, I never heard of him.
Yeah, you never heard of him. And I don't know if you knew this because we had lost touch, but he's from Montreal. I knew him before he was Rush St. Pierre. I gave him and David Loiseau high gear to work their elbows and their knees for ground and pound so they wouldn't damage their face. It's pretty amazing. But the Kempo, depending on who you're training, and this is like back then, things weren't so woke and touchy-feely as they are today. Like that's like you were playing Canadian football, and then you went, wait a minute, there's this NFL, which is way more violent and guys are bigger and stronger. Like you went up, like Kyokushin guys that jump. And I don't want people from Kempo to start bitching at me and get me canceled. But you went from like the Kempo to Kyokushinkai. Why? What was that? What did you feel in the Kyokushinkai that you went, I got to do this?
I wish it was a very like deep analytical approach, but I didn't want to go back to the Kempo school because I felt like a jerk quitting. And I looked in, ironically, the yellow pages.
No way.
Body school. And I saw the one that was like this. It was pretty far. I was like about 13 and a half, 14. I jumped on a bus, took like a 30, 45-minute ride. I mean, imagine, I don't know how many kids, you take a bus ride for almost an hour, go to this karate school. I meet the owner of the school, but the instructors, it was weird. It was an American owner, but a Japanese instructor. And that was kind of, I found out that dojo was kind of like ground zero at the time for Masoyama. And he sent a
Right.
lot of what called the uchi deshi, like the inside, a lot of students, Masoyama and Shihan Master Soshu Oyama. They had the same name, Shigeru Oyama. No relation though. But so it was just luck. I hate to say it was just luck, and I learned very quickly what it meant. I described this in other interviews, but the business plan was kind of weird because the place was always packed, but after 2-3 hours of training, everybody would line up, and once you heard line up, you were getting your ass kicked because everybody would line up, and then the end of the class, they would start from one end, and you'd fight the next guy over. So you could be watching 10, 20 fights, and you're fighting the guy next to you. So who's getting hurt, who's getting carried off, and you're like, I'm fighting this guy.
How old are you at this time?
14, 15.
Nice. And guys are just getting cracked.
Adults, kids, whatever. And well, I was 14, 15, so that was almost like a segue into the adult class already. But and then after that, he would cherry pick like the top students to see who's on their game that week, and they would beat the shit out of each other. And then the instructor would fight everybody one at a time. So 20, 30, 40, 50 guys. And then the objective was to weed out the weak people. So that's why I'm saying what a weird business plan that was, right? It's like get rid of as many students as possible because they're not going to be tough enough. So, and I would go home like ribs and my legs red with the leg kicks and all that shit, accidental punches to the face, with no gloves on. And, my parents, you're hardcore European. My dad escaped from communist Albania. My mother from Italy. Like, what are you doing? Get a job. You're working so hard. It's like, you get 3 jobs. Look at how much effort you're putting into that. So that kind of like led into ultimately me trying to figure out a way to monetize it, because I was almost trying to rationalize all the time I was spending. I was like, how could I waste all this time and then just be a broke ass, martial arts guy, which there are many of, you know what I mean? And you and I chatted about this a little bit, about my pivoting. You called it pivoting, which really gave me a sense of, what, he's right. Because I used to talk about that with my sensei a lot of times about business. And he's like, oh, usual stuff. It's like, if you have a passion, if you love something, and he still has a dojo, man, out in Arizona, man. He left Oyama's organization. It's just him. His gi doesn't even have a patch on it.
Right.
And he's teaching monsters like in a small club in Arizona. You know what I mean? So, but I realized that the dedication, look, let's face it, you want to accomplish things in life. And, I got involved in real estate later than I would like to, but I think it was the right time because I got out of my system, if that makes any sense. I mean, I was renegotiating a lease with the landlord, and I thought to myself, and that dojo was never like what they call what do you call it? A McDojo. I had like 40, 50 students, but I used it to film all my videos. So it was really a studio.
Right.
I needed a physical street address to take credit card orders, or else they thought you were just a scam, right? If you gave them your home. So I needed a street address and bodies to do videos. And the lease came up, and then it hit me after all these years, my dad telling me, try real estate. He's like, if I got 1 student or 100 students, this guy he's got to get the rent every month. No ifs, ands, or buts. And I think I want to be that guy one day. It may not be a bad thing. And then maybe I could still have a school in one of my properties, and then, which as a 56-year-old, it's still one of my aspirations. It would be so cool, you probably heard of like 40 acres and a mule. I want to have 55 units and a dojo. That was my goal. You know what I'm saying? So that way I can pursue it the way I want, because the dollars, like I see everything now, everything's getting so even more splintered than ever. Like even grappling, submission grappling, this gi grappling, and this, and different organizations and the rules, and mine's better than yours. And the person saying that, you got to look at what their agenda is. If their agenda is to keep that art or side of the art alive, they're going to say whatever they have to because that's a monetary
Sure.
objective, right? I feel like I liberated myself, and I was able to do Kyokushin at a high level. I got my black belt in judo. I did compete only as a brown belt. All those judo tournaments I were in, ironically, I got my brown belt in like 12 months because I was still teaching. I had my own karate school. Would go to another school and take privates in judo, get my ass kicked, and then after about a year, he's like, "Listen, you can't just keep taking privates. You got to take group classes." So when I took the group class, he promoted me to brown belt, like right there, like right after about a year's worth of privates. He goes, "Now you got to compete." And that's where it really started. I was starting to approach my late 20s, and I'm like, you know what? I can't. This is crazy. These guys are like, you ever see like wrestling, like high school wrestling? These guys
Yeah.
fight. These guys have like 50, 60 matches a year. These guys get a backpack and they do 4 tournaments a weekend. And I'm like, I can't do this at 27 years old. What am I doing? So I got a few out of my system, and then integrated into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with a Brazilian guy that got his judo black belt before he was even a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt in
Nice.
Brazil. So that's Edson Carvalho. And so I just felt though that I liberated myself from having to justify that my art's the best, and I got to figure out how I'm going to monetize, make money, and do I have to teach kids?
So
And I got to.
I want to interrupt you here and tell you so you were intuitively developing a mixed martial art protocol. Like this is like many years, like at some point, almost a decade, but certainly 5, 6, 7 years before, the UFC hit, and you were striking, kicking. Another thing about you is you were also really into mobility and strength training and stretching. It was almost, and there's a lot of people that talk about all this stuff, but they don't get world class at it. I mean, your splits, your strength, your cardio, your and I still quote you. I use it so much that some people attribute it to me now, and I always have to correct them. But one of my favorite lines that you said is, "You can't fake endurance," and I always remember that you said that when we first. I don't remember where I read it, but I've been saying it for years. I've said it more than you say it, so people think I said it.
That's because my endurance sucked. If you check this out, my first book was called Phenomenal Endurance Training, because all my works were weaknesses that I undertook to try to master to the best of my ability, right? Knock out any attacker, arm locks, choking techniques, leg kicks. All those were topics that I was trying to put in an encyclopedic format for myself, almost like a time capsule. Like now I revert back to them. Besides YouTube, I mean, it's just amazing what's happened to everything. But
Right.
but to your point, like 91, was 2-3 years before the UFC. There's video of me grappling, in my dojo, in my home, in my garage. 1987. There's me doing a front guillotine in there. So, but yeah, fighting is fighting. And but I really became enamored with the jujitsu because when you think about it, all of the escaping from a headlock and somebody takes you down or somebody attacks you, the bear hug and all that other shit, that's universal.
Right.
But arts don't express it.
I want to show some of this shit here. But you got really good at the shit. Like there's a lot of people who are really good at their striking, but they're mixed martial artists, and they show you're very good at the fit. You're a very good instructor, very good explaining stuff. You're a really good grappler, really good striker, really good fitness. It was interesting. I hated you.
You alluded, and I'll tell you what it was when you talked about the stretching and the strength training. Like, if done carefully, like I always believed, like a ping pong player could benefit from weight training,
right?
If they did it right. Okay, I always believed that in my book, like my phenomenal strength training, I get into just the core exercises, squats, curls, bench press, things like that. And, when I was younger, we used to do like with my friends, imagine doing like 7 exercises for your tricep. It was completely worthless. you need a tricep first to start doing the
Right.
front side, whatever. So, but flexibility, strength, all that was translatable. Now it's just gone to forget it, like PEDs and I'm 56. I'm still scared shitless. Like people like Marco, why don't you try TRT?
Right.
Guys are talking about it at 30, late 20s,
Yeah.
30.
Yeah. I know.
You know,
At 62, I know like 25 people that are 30, 40, 50 years old, and they're all doing all that shit. And
the
I'm like,
problem is
well,
you can't. You when you stop that, it's worse. You almost destroy your potential, your natural potential, and then frankly, who knows what can happen medically, man. I just went through a whole issue. I thought I passed my kidney stones a couple of months ago. That led to an ultrasound, then a second one, then a CT scan, and then another one, and then you got this, you got swollen lymph nodes. I had to get biopsy. I had to get tissue sample from my
Jesus.
chest to make sure it wasn't cancer. So for like 6-8 weeks, I'm like, holy shit. My wife and I will, hey, if that's God's will, we'll deal with it, whatever. You start thinking some crazy shit,
Of course.
but it was, I'm like, okay, I got to get back to training again. You know what I mean? So, anything you do, you start doing like chemically to your body. You could throw something, you may have cancer 5 years from now because you started, and look, I don't need to do it to make money. I was in high school and I Googled recently research on this. I did a report and it was something crazy. Like they interviewed like these Olympic athletes and they said, listen, here's a drug that will give you a gold medal, break records, you're #1 in the world in your sport, but you're going to die 12 months later. It's like 50% of them said, yeah, no fucking problem.
Wow.
And I forget what study it is. But
Wow.
that's how obsessed you can be achieving greatness in your field, and to me, that is very telling. Look at Kyokushin training. I look at it now. Like sometimes I see guys like when they punch the chest. Look what happened to that football player that that almost died, right? That got tackled. With the I'm like, do that class, full body, full blown fucking pounding in the sternum and chest. I'm surprised more people didn't die. Like your local Kyokushin karate school, man. It's crazy what we do to strive for excellence sometimes, as humans.
That's insane. That study has startled me. But I believe it. And I'm like you. I don't want to touch anything. I don't, I'll hesitate to take a Motrin. It's like something's got to be really bad for me to do an anti-inflammatory. And I know other people who are just like, but let's turn to martial arts. I'm glad you're healthy. Most important thing, right. I'm glad you're healthy.
One thing about the supplementation, I have tried creatine, over the counter.
Yeah.
And when COVID hit, I went on a mission to get back into shape. That was like the catalyst for me. It was, as a matter of fact, we're coming up on the 3-year anniversary, right? This March. And the funny part is I made the most gains. I lost 37 pounds in about 90 days. I did a 100-mile bike ride, drinking water and cutting what I was eating in half. That's it. Then after that, I was looking for supplementation. How can I push another 5 seconds faster? And can I be lift 5 pounds more? And you start looking at all these different, maybe this supplement or that supplement. Meanwhile, I made the most gains just exercising, eating less, and drinking water.
This is recent, a couple of years ago. Yeah. And I remember when you started documenting and posting online, when you started getting back in shape and stuff like that. That was good.
I started on March 14th because Friday the 13th was my physical. The next day I said I walked down the steps on my deck in my backyard and up 10 times. Then I did it again the next day. Then I jogged down because it's easier to jog down and jog up. from there to 90 days later, 37 pounds and a 100-mile bike ride, because I started riding my bike in April. And I'm like, this is amazing. No impact, no high impact on the joints. I became obsessed with bicycling. I was doing 20, 30, 40-mile rides and then doing it again in the evening, because it was just even just therapeutically, it was just helpful, but that's my story on supplementation. But
yeah, nice. Let's jump back to some
martial
arts stuff. And we do have, guys, if you're listening and you got questions for Marco or me, pop them in there. I see we've got a couple already in the comments. And if you're new and logged in here, just post in where you're from, what martial art you train in, and if you got any questions, and we'll get to them in a little bit. We're just going to chit chat a little bit more. This is the No Fear podcast, and I love talking about fear and the psychology of fear and fear management. And it's crazy because you recently had the health scare, and you just need to have like an external stimuli, and your brain starts just running this movie, and it can consume you. And I recently did an article on imagined fear versus real fear, and how it was funny. I was having this conversation this morning. We've all seen that meme or the language that goes around the internet. Hey, danger's real, but fear is a choice. And I wrote an article going, fear is not a choice. When you get a fear spike and the subsequent adrenaline dump and cortisol shot and all the other neurochemicals that are flying through your body that make you break out in a sweat or butterflies in your stomach, palms sweaty, or tunnel vision or panic attacks. Nobody's choosing that. So fear happens as a reactive response to the external stimulus or the internal stimulus. What you do with your fear is the choice. Am I going to live with it? Am I going to learn to manage it? Am I going to explore it? And that's the signage behind me. Fuck fear isn't me trying to be a badass and be cool. Fuck fear is an acronym for face it, understand it. Yeah, face it, understand it, control it, know it. And you're using it. So face it, I'm not going to avoid it. Understand it. I'm going to research and extract what I can from this education. And then this idea that I may need to do this next fight, whatever the fight is, relationship, health, financial, with fear because I don't know the outcome. And so this is a big misunderstanding of the control part, because a lot of people think they see people perform like that spinning hook kick where you knock the guy out. You're totally calm, you're cool. It's a perfect time kick. It's a small target to a small weapon, like highly improbable, like gorgeous movement. And in there, you were hitting a flow state in the zone, but maybe 5 minutes before that fight, you were on the side going, fuck, here we go. Let's and talking, you're like, and another great Kyokushin guy, George St. Pierre, recently came out in interviews saying he is terrified before all of his fights, that he hates it.
It's scary.
And that the one time and that's what I meant to tell you, Elisa. If you could pull it up somewhere, we have it on Vimeo somewhere. It'd be fun to show here. Is the George St. Pierre thing we use in the Be Your Own Bodyguard course, where he says the one time he wasn't afraid was when he fought Matt Serra and he got knocked out. He said, maybe I should have been afraid, like making a joke that, and Mike Tyson and Customato talked about, like, fear is the friend of exceptional people. Like we all need to learn how to manage our fear. Anyways, that was a little rant. I want you to go back in time if you can. I know you're old and your memory's gone, but when you were an early intuitive entrepreneur, right? Like you're a young kid going, what kind of fucking business model is this? Like kicking the shit out of people at the school. Like how do you run a business? Like, when you decided to open your dojo, or when you decided I'm going to stop doing Kempo where we're doing this, and I'm going to go to a place where they kick the shit out of me and everyone else. And as I get better, I'm going to get my ass beaten harder. I'll stay there. all of those, whether you remember or not, are decisions on managing fear because it's easy to avoid. Can you talk us through any recollection or any thinking or any mentors or guides
Yeah.
that you had
I'm
there?
always scared.
Hang on a sec. This is the, I don't want that there right now. We'll show that after. Go ahead, Marco.
Well, a couple of points you brought up, and I'll try to keep it as concise as possible. The the acronym that you have there for how you approach fear. One of the things is keeping calm, right? So I'm going to give it in a couple of bullets. So when we used to start and end the class, we would meditate, right? We'd opening meditation and closing meditation. So I was like, how do you clear your mind? That's your mind is racing, especially after a class. The idea was to calm yourself down because you don't want to go out and start killing people because you just did
Right.
2 training. Before the class, it's to get ready to control that fear of what's coming. So
Right.
there was some validity to why you're meditating before and after a class.
Love it.
We used to use a focal point of like trying to calm a raging river. So think about this: if a river is completely calm and I threw a pebble in there, you know what happens to the wave, right? If it's a raging river and I threw a pebble in there, you're not going to see shit. So how you react, the calmer you are, you're not going to eliminate fear, but how you address the fear is going to be improved because
Right.
you're in a calm state. Now, a direct correlation to that, to the training, like I fought in those tournaments 2 years prior. 1 year I came in second, another year I lost. I wasn't training as hard. I was still maybe partying because I was 21 when I won that championship. You had to be at least 18 to fight. So 18, 19. I think I skipped 1 year because we shot the video for World Oyama Karate, the instructional video. Another point that got me to think, I should be taping myself at some point. But preparing, I used to think that, okay, the way Oyama trained in the mountains, like I would go in the woods, I would do a front kick on a tree with my left leg and my right leg 1,000 times, a roundhouse kick 1,000 times, combinations thousands of times, conditioning. So I was trying to eliminate fear in that respect by preparedness, right?
Sure.
Because I was fearful, but I knew what was coming. Now I remember you brought up situations where, like, if you're getting mugged, you're walking down the street and there's a guy hiding behind a wall, getting sight. Like he's at 8, 9, 10. You're just at 2, walking
Right.
around. He comes right out at you at 8, 9, and 10, and you're at 2. How do you deal with that? You could deal with a tournament because it's funny when before the fighters started pairing up and fighting, we were all under the bleachers and they were like announcing the tournament. They were showing the rules. We got a little sewing kit with the numbers that we sewed on the back of our gis. And I remember a situation where like I pricked my finger and it started bleeding. And I'm like, I said it out loud. I'm like, holy shit, the tournament didn't even start yet and I'm bleeding all over the place. And everybody's looking at me like, is this guy really joking?
Right.
we were all, that was my personality a little bit. Maybe that was a way to try to calm myself down. But you used to hear stories like in Japan, if you ever watch some knockdown tournaments, especially in Japan, like guys, like there's no punching to the face, but sometimes a guy would punch as high as possible on the chest or hit the throat. And guys would have, I've seen tracheotomies on the mat carrying somebody off. And I'm like, so they scare the shit out of you. And like, okay, I'm going into this, like I'm going into battle. So,
Right.
but I knew that battle. So, and I was trying to prepare. But back to the point, the river and trying to, like, you're about to get choked. If you start panicking, you're going to go out. But you might, okay, shit, hold on, let me take a breath. If I turn 2 centimeters this way, and if I can get a finger in there, I can protect my carotid artery, or grab this gi or the guy's lapel and neutralize it. I just bought myself some time because I didn't panic.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So the breathing, meditation, obviously there's preparedness. I mean, you're not going to pass a test, a medical exam, if you're scared by not studying. It's not going to happen. You know what I mean? So it's a combination of things. You try to reach a level of peacefulness, but the preparedness is what really counts. If that makes any sense,
Yeah, of course.
whether it be in the business world or in the martial arts or anything like that. I mean, when I got into real estate and cold calling, like I used to rationalize like everybody, it's so scary calling up strangers on the phone. But I used to think to myself, dude, this guy can't beat me up. He's on the, he's a lot. I can say whatever I want. He may just hang up the phone on me, but it took some time, and you got to dive into it, and then you start picking up subtleties and nuances on how to, what salutations. Is it the gatekeeper? Is it the principal himself? Is it just, you're leaving a voicemail on a machine? You just
Right.
start sharpening your game up, and the fear starts, becoming controllable.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't go away. It doesn't go
Yeah.
away. I still go to class myself. I try to do one no-gi and one gi class a week. I still get butterflies, and I could just stand there with my belt on and look all good, like I'm the old guy with the black belt. But I still get in there and roll around. It's pretty scary.
Right.
So, but that's the way I'm keeping my mind sharp. I think, by those encounters. That
Nice. That's a great answer. Great answer. Do you when the UFC started? I think I remember us talking about it when it first happened. Did it ever occur to you to enter, or you passed your prime, or what were your thoughts as a guy who, I've got, and I just say this because my wife Jesse's father, Fred, if he's listening, he might be listening. He's a huge fan, so he listens to my shit. Hi, Fred. He's a super smart. He's a super smart dude, but he's a guy that, like, if he said it once, he said it 100 times. Something will happen in the market, in the news. He'll go, "I said that was going to happen 10 years ago," right? So his intuition was always spot on, but he was never in a position or at the place to make it happen. So he didn't participate. Right. He didn't participate in the victory, but he'd go, "I knew that was going to happen. We talked about that. I remember that 10 years ago."
Yes.
So, 13 years before the UFC, you were doing that shit. And then 5 years you were doing that stuff. And then it happens. What was you as an entrepreneur, as a combat athlete?
Right.
Where was your head when you saw that?
Well, it's interesting. The UFC, there was remember all the newer promotions that were coming out after that? There was one World Combat Championship that was supposed to be Henzo's platform, right? Eric Paulson, remember, with the hair, that Gasco, they did it a little differently.
Sure.
I got a letter for that, and I made one simple request. I said, if I get hurt, can you guys pay for my medical expenses? Nothing. And you want to talk about intuition? It's fucking 2023, and this guy's making $5,000 fighting in the UFC.
Right.
That's the dumbest shit I've ever seen before in my life. I mean, I could say I made an excuse. I mean, look, back then too, it was like if you lost, you thought maybe your whole career was going to be over, right? Shit like that. Like, I think back, it's one of the things I regret, maybe whether it had been judo or even karate or UFC, I would have loved to have competed more, because I realized, fast forward, everybody lost. Everybody loses. You got, look at, like, every Gracie lost in an MMA fight, right? Yeah, we can go down the list. Roger, Henzo, blah, blah, blah. So it's your dedication. But when you're talking about business, I was already, I think, in my upper 20s. So not that it's not necessarily past your prime, but I was already thinking business. I'm like, dude, if I'm going to deviate now and start training for the UFC, you didn't have a camp, you didn't go anywhere. You just like, all right, I'm just not going to work and hope my mom, or my wife or my girlfriend, like, makes food for me, and I'm going to train fucking 12 hours a day and then go fight for, a few dollars. Like, I did that for 10 years. I fought full contact for plastic trophies.
Right.
I was done with that shit, So that was intuitive, because I was like, hey, listen, will you guys at least, like, bring me to the hospital if somebody snaps my neck? I mean, I was also a realist, anything can happen. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, that's all I thought about back then, because it was like, yeah, this is that. See, I have an opinion. I think in November of 1993 was, right, the first UFC. It's the best thing that ever happened to the martial arts, man. I don't care what anybody says. Oh, these guys, look at the crowd, and that's not the true essence of the art. Dude, you're talking about martial arts, man. You're practicing in the air, like taking somebody's eyeball out. How spiritual is that? Even if you never fought, right? Here's an outlet to at least see if this shit has a chance. And, you can argue all you want whether it was fixed, so to speak, or, you can't say that they left grapplers out because Shamrock was in there. That guy knew what he was doing.
Sure.
Dan Severn was choked out in like the third or fourth one, right, by a triangle choke. I mean, those are legit. That's some great stuff,
Yeah.
It's funny. I think there were UFCs, I think, after 4 or 5 where like there were judo guys holding a sign up for hoists.
Yeah.
Even though some of them poo-poo it, some of them don't. It is that whole, this BJJ and judo.
No, I mean it was in many ways it was as transformational as, let's say, when Bruce Lee passed away.
Disruption.
What's that?
Disruption. It was a disruption. Yeah. Just like in every business, there's a disruption, especially now with technology companies. Kodak, Sears, it took them, Polaroid, took 100 years for these companies to disappear. Now, in 6 months, you get Chat GPT and, freaking, Elon with the Tesla. You got every company on his heels trying to do an electric thing. Amazon, Amazon could disappear in 5 years for all we know. But, they get into real estate and transportation and newspapers and you know what I'm saying? So the martial arts is the same way. It's the same thing.
Yeah, it's crazy.
People don't get it. That's what I liked about, that's why I like submission grappling because, it's funny. Here's an art. Jiu-jitsu was what it was known for, like taking somebody down and choking them on the ground, right? Now that's the first thing they'll tell you is like, oh, our takedowns suck. We got to learn wrestling and sambo and judo to sharpen up. I mean, that mentality should be used in all aspects of life. There's an open-mindedness there. You can say whatever you want, but Brazilian jiu-jitsu and submission wrestling and combat grappling was not what it looked like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not, unfortunately, it's so different. Like even the gi guys, like Gordon Ryan, they want him. I think we lost. They're trying to push him into the gi. Why does he have to do that, man? He's doing a great job in the no gi and the no gi grappling. The disciplines have become so unique that you have a guy like that. That's a pinnacle, could be taken out like in a gi format. You know what I'm saying? It's just, to me, that's amazing. But that's like wrestling. Wrestling, you look at high school and college wrestling. My son did it. And you want to talk about fear and lessons. He started as a freshman in high school at St. Joe's High School in Jersey. They take their wrestling very serious out here. He goes, Dad, I think I'm going to try wrestling. I'm like, what are you talking about, man? Some of these guys have been doing fucking wrestling since the 2nd grade. They go to camps. They wrestle outside of the season. He goes, I have a goal for you. You're going to win. You're going to double your wins every year as far as I can help. He won 1 match in his freshman year, 5 in his sophomore year, and then he won 13. Even get third place at a tournament. So Rutgers University had a local tournament. He came in 3rd. But then he didn't even go as a senior because he knew that wasn't his gig. All the wrestlers there were trying to get scholarships from wrestling. He got an academic scholarship. But I'm going to tell you one story about fear, and you're going to
before you do, I lost
topic.
Marco.
I was preparing to give a speech in front of my colleagues for an award that I got for selling real estate, right?
Yeah.
And my son that evening was going to fight this guy he was being touted as he was going to have his 100th pin, okay, 100th pin in wrestling, and my son, barely months of training, is supposed to be fighting this guy. So he comes up to me and goes, Dad, man, I don't know how you do it. I'd be scared to death if I had to speak in front of somebody. And I'm like, dude, you're fighting this guy that has 100 pins, man. He goes, I don't care. I just, whatever's going to happen, happened. So like he taught me a lesson, about, he didn't sweat it because he knew he wasn't going to kill the guy. But, the mentality was like, you know what? He's going to have the hardest 10 seconds of his life.
Right.
trying to pin me. So I just thought the dichotomy there was amazing. Like he was worried about me because I had to speak in front of like a couple of hundred people, and this guy's fighting, a guy that's like had his 99 pins before
Right.
his match with him. So, that whole the fear and the training. I mean, it all comes together. But you have to acknowledge it, right? See
Yeah.
what you're doing is I can look back in 20, 30 years, and when you iterate something from a scientific standpoint, I'm like, yeah, you know what? That's exactly what happened. And that's another level of learning, if that makes any sense. I'm sorry, I'm going off on tangents here.
No, that's okay. Can you hear me okay now? Marco, can you hear me? No.
I lost you.
Yeah. Hang on a second. I'm going to remove you.
Hello?
If you want, I just kicked Marco off there. Hopefully he'll log back in on the same link. I'm going to put this same
you scared to fight this guy?
Listen
I'm
to this guy.
scared to fight everybody. I'm always afraid, and it's not going to change anything. It's a subjectivity. I'm always scared. And you know what? Thank you, because I perform at my best when I'm scared. But even though I'm scared, I'm going to make the walk and walk the walk and do my job on the night of the fight, and that's how fighters should be, It's being scared for a person who doesn't fight. Sometimes they don't understand that. Oh, he's scared of doing this, doing that. Yeah, of course I'm scared. And I'm not scared to admit that I'm scared. Some guys, they don't want to admit it. I'm always scared. There's not a fight that I had that I wasn't scared. And the one that I wasn't scared enough, it was Matsero, and I got knocked out. So maybe it's a good thing to be scared.
Pretty great. We had your audio before, but we lost you, and then
no problem.
It out. So it was a nice segue on different ways to manage fear. Listen, there's psychological tricks for everyone out there. There's psychological tricks, like saying, hey, this is going to be the hardest, 10 seconds of his life. If you read Gates of Fire, all the young, inexperienced warriors are listening to these stories of how the enemy's going to loose so many arrows that it'll block out the sun and the sky will be dark, right? And Leonidas says, so we'll fight in the dark, right? And these are like fun things. We listen, we get goosebumps, we get go. There's different ways to manage fear, but the key for everybody is you need to create the self-awareness where you accept to yourself, you say to yourself, I am afraid. What am I afraid of? And then you can focus on stuff. So like you being out in the forest doing 1,000 kicks, if one of your fears was biomechanic excellence, endurance, and stamina, like if you took care of that, then suddenly you're only left with the fear of, am I going to show up? Am I going to give it all my all? But I don't have to worry about, if the scenario calls for this kick, I own it. I got it. If I need to last longer than 5 minutes, I remember one of the guys I was training lost a title fight in an MMA fight. And he had won, had he won the title? He was fighting for a title fight. It was a 25-minute, 5-minute rounds. And he lost, and then the champ passed out in the ring, like just fell out, threw up, had to be carried out on a stretcher. And one of the guys, like, was part of the fans, and one of the students said, yeah, even though Phil lost, the guy who beat him had to be carried out on a stretcher. And he was like, and I said, well, maybe if Phil had been carried out on a stretcher, he'd also have the belt. In other words, he still lost. The objective of the fight was to win. That was the only, that was the only objective there. But all of that is, you can't fake endurance. I like to say that. I'm the first guy that ever said that. You might have heard that expression. But that's a fear. And that comes back to that Vince Lombardi famous quote, fatigue makes cowards of us all.
True.
A lot of us guys, if you're listening to this, we all have certain fears that represent our metaphoric Achilles heels. But you can't tackle it, manage it, strengthen it if you can't identify it. That's the self-awareness. So improving your self-awareness enhances your critical thinking skills, which augments your situational awareness skills. And situational awareness is like you reading the world. What do I need to know? That could be a market change. That could be a relationship change. And every one of us is, and I love talking about this, but every one of us has something go sideways or south in our life. And none of it, for the most part, is ever instantaneous. It's always you go there, you go, hey, my hip's bothering me. They go in, well, look at this, it's all fucked up because of this. And you realize, oh, that was I lost you again, buddy. There you are, you're back. The issue with your back that started with your bad knee was fucked up because your foot was fucked up. And it was 3 years ago you had that injury and you never fixed your posture. You suddenly have no money in the bank. It wasn't that somebody stole from you. It was you didn't understand budgets and business and return on investment and shit over a period of years. Your wife leaves you, your husband leaves you. They weren't in love with you yesterday and went, you know what, I'm going to fuck off tomorrow. It was like you did. And all of these examples have to do with situational awareness. Every victim of violence, let's go back to fighting and self-defense. Every victim of violence who lived to tell the tale said they had a bad feeling before the attack. Every single one of them that I've interviewed, every story that I've written, if you understand it, decode that. But when you train in most martial arts, you're not taught about pre-contact indicators that are also include intuition. I got a bad feeling about this. Oh, there's a guy coming out of the shadows. I'll pretend nothing's wrong and walk to my car and pretend I'm safe. And then I get jumped. But my training only started with how to get out of a headlock. So I was fucked for like the first 10 seconds of the fight, right?
Hey, don't you my head? You want to put me in a headlock? And
yeah. Here, put me in a headlock. Anyways, dude, let's get to some of the questions. There's a few in here. I like to keep these around an hour, and we can do more of these. It was so fun to catch up, and one of the things that I just wanted to say, in some of my promotion is like when I look back at your career, and I look at you, you don't look 56. So I thought you were like 70 or something, 70, 72. You're an athlete, but you stay in shape. You gained weight and you said, fuck this. You got back in shape. You're moving. And so that's leadership. And you're showing yourself, your family, but also you've got tons of fans from everything you did in the 80s and 90s. And I was a fan back then. But you were doing video training and documenting before Gary Vaynerchuk said document everything, right? You were doing mixed martial arts before mixed martial art was a thing. You were blending the jiu-jitsu and the wrestling and the grappling and the striking before it was a thing. You were doing bare knuckle, and now there's like bare knuckle tournaments. You wrote books before all these. Now there's like 100, how to publish on Amazon. Right. And you're doing it with a fucking typewriter now. So those of you listening here who aren't maybe of our, I'm 62, Marco's 50, you're 56 now, right? So if you're, and some of you I saw in the comments, you're old school like us, but some of people listening, and then again, this gets streamed out on LinkedIn and Twitter, and there might be young people. Well, easy for him to do. What he did at that period was the hardest you could do it. It was a fucking typewriter. It was writing things. There was you didn't email. You had to fucking lick a stamp. You're lucky you didn't die like what's his face, his wife in Seinfeld.
And photo addresses, by the way, right? When I did that 2000.
Right. Yeah, no, it was crazy. So one, I want to thank you for doing that because in like that paved the way for a lot of people. Like why isn't he doing? Why aren't we doing that? But you were one of those guys, man. You're part of martial art history. Whether you, I know you're a humble guy. I don't know if you think about that, but
that's hard.
You're part of martial art history, dude.
Hi, everybody. It's Coach Blauer here. And unfortunately, both Marco and myself experienced very weird internet issues We were both kicked off the podcast, logged back in. This went on back and forth, and we decided to cut the end of the podcast. I will have Marco back on again soon. He's a fantastic guest. I encourage you to follow him online. And thank you, and apologies for any inconvenience for the abrupt ending.